You did what? My voice cracked as I stared at Carol across the kitchen table. My stomach twisted into knots. She didn't flinch, just calmly sipped her coffee and said, I used it for the wedding. Luke needed help and it's family money. You'll get over it. I blinked, stunned. Family money? That was my college fund. I worked for 2 years saving every dime. She shrugged like we were talking about spare change. I invested it in something important, your brother's wedding. My blood boiled. Luke wasn't even my brother. He hadn't even said thank you. My father walked into the room and asked, What's going on? I snapped. Ask Carol. She spent my college savings. He froze. There must be some misunderstanding. Carol just smiled. That night, my rage turned into resolve. If no one else would stand up for me, I would. Carol smirked. You won't win. I replied, Watch me. Emma Williams was 19 years old and had spent nearly a decade living under the quiet dominance of her stepmother, Carol. After her mom passed away when she was just 10, Emma clung to the hope that her father's remarriage would bring some sense of normalcy. But Carol had made her priorities crystal clear from the beginning. Her son Luke came first, always. Emma, she was the leftover, the shadow in the hallway, the one who cleaned up after dinner while Luke bragged about his weekend plans. Despite the cold shoulder and emotional distance, Emma tried to find her own path. She got her first job at 16, waiting tables at a local diner. The hours were brutal, the tips inconsistent, but she was determined. Every dollar she made went into her savings account, tucked away with a single purpose: college. Her mother had dreamed of her becoming a nurse, and Emma was committed to making that dream real. Carol always spoke about financial literacy, constantly lecturing Emma about saving wisely and not being naive about money. One afternoon, Carol offered to help Emma invest her savings. You'll get better returns than leaving it in a basic account, she had said, sipping coffee with one manicured hand while flipping through a luxury home magazine with the other. Emma, desperate to prove she was responsible and trustworthy, handed over the money. $8,000. 2 years of work. Every missed movie night. Every double shift. Every Friday she skipped out on friends to pick up an extra table. Gone. As Luke's wedding neared, the household buzzed with excitement. Carol spent hours selecting florists, planning the perfect menu, and coordinating outfits for extended family. Emma assumed Carol was footing the bill. Her own father had said they were helping as much as they could. Emma stayed quiet, not wanting to disrupt the already fragile dynamic in the house. Then came that morning in the kitchen. Emma had just poured herself a cup of coffee when Carol sat down, looking far too pleased with herself. The conversation started off mundane: weather, groceries, a quick comment about the wedding photographer. But then Emma asked about her college fund. I used it for the wedding, Carol said casually, as if she'd borrowed a sweater without asking. Emma's jaw dropped. You did what? It's family money, Carol replied with a shrug. Luke needed help. It was the right thing to do. You'll get over it. Her father walked in just as Emma's voice began to shake. She spent my college savings, Emma said, holding back tears. He blinked in confusion. There must be some misunderstanding. Carol didn't deny it. She simply stood up, took her coffee, and walked out. Emma sat there, stunned. Luke hadn't said a word. He was too busy planning his dream wedding to care. Her father looked torn, but unwilling to challenge his wife. That night, lying awake in her bed, Emma made a decision. She wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, she visited the local library and found a flyer for a small law office. She called the number. I need help, she said. Someone used my money without permission. The lawyer listened, asked questions, and finally said, if you can prove it was yours and you didn't consent, you may have a case. Emma's heart pounded. She had no legal background, no support. Her father was too afraid to upset Carol, and Carol was ready to fight her tooth and nail. But she wasn't doing this for revenge. She was doing this to be heard. To say, for the first time, that she mattered. After the confrontation in the kitchen, Emma expected her father to step in, to at least ask questions, to defend her, to do something. But instead, he avoided the subject entirely. That evening, he disappeared into his workshop and stayed there until long after she'd gone to bed. The next morning, he barely made eye contact as he grabbed his keys and left for work, without saying a word. His silence spoke volumes. Carol, on the other hand, became more emboldened. She moved through the house like nothing had happened, humming to herself as she arranged wedding details and ordered decorations. Emma began finding passive-aggressive notes left in plain sight, one on the fridge that read, "Maybe save up again. 3rd time's the charm." Another taped to the bathroom mirror. "Some people just aren't cut out for responsibility." Luke said nothing. He didn't even acknowledge her when they passed each other in the hallway. To him, Emma's college dream was nothing more than collateral damage. Emma tried again to talk to her father. She laid out everything. How she had worked for 2 years, how Carol had promised to invest the money, how the truth came out like a punch to the gut. He sighed, ran a hand through his thinning hair, and said, "I just don't think it's worth tearing the family apart over this. It's only money." Only money. To him, it might have been. But to her, it was everything. Her future, her education, her chance to become something more than an afterthought in this house. When Emma brought up the idea of speaking to a lawyer, Carol laughed. "You're really going to take your own family to court over a few $1,000s?" she said, her voice laced with mockery. "Grow up, Emma. It's called life. Sometimes things don't go your way." But Emma didn't flinch. That night, she opened the folder where she kept every pay stub from the diner, printed out her bank statements, and found the note she had written Carol the day she handed her the money. It wasn't a formal agreement, but it clearly stated her intentions. For college investment only. As she laid the papers out on her desk, the truth hit her like a cold wave. Carol hadn't just stolen the money. She had never believed Emma's future mattered. To Carol, Emma's nursing school dream was a hobby. Luke's wedding, with its flowers and tuxedos, was the real investment. And her father had let it happen. The betrayal ran deeper than dollars and cents. It was the way no one defended her, the way no one believed her future was worth protecting, the way she had become invisible in her own home. As Emma gathered the documents to bring to her lawyer, she no longer felt unsure or afraid. She felt furious. Because now she understood. She'd never really been seen. But that was about to change. Emma sat in Mr. Peterson's modest office, a manila folder clutched in her lap, as he flipped through the documentation she'd provided. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady as she recounted everything, how she saved every tip, how Carol promised to invest the money, and how it vanished overnight into her stepbrother's wedding. Mr. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. "You have a case," he said. "It hinges on proving ownership and lack of consent. These bank statements and your handwritten note help, but we'll need more. I'll subpoena Carol's financial records. If she used the money improperly, it will show." When the lawsuit was officially filed, the reaction at home was immediate. Her father looked devastated. "Emma, please," he said, pacing the living room. "It's not worth this. You're going to rip this family apart." "I already did," Emma snapped. "I'm just holding her accountable." Carol, unsurprisingly, laughed when she found out. "Go ahead, sweetheart," she said with a sneer. "You think a judge is going to side with a moody teenager over her stepmother? Be my guest." Emma ignored the noise and stayed focused. A week later, Mr. Peterson called her back in. He looked more serious than before. "We found something," he said, sliding over a printed spreadsheet. "It's not just about your money." As Emma scanned the pages, her eyes widened. Thousands of dollars, withdrawn steadily over the last 3 years from a joint account shared between Carol and her father. Spa weekends, jewelry purchases, designer handbags, international travel charges, Carol hadn't just stolen Emma's college fund. She'd been bleeding the household dry for years, funneling money into a private account and spending it with impunity. $8,000, 0 cents, was only the beginning, Mr. Peterson said quietly. This is a pattern, and if your father didn't consent to these withdrawals, there may be more legal implications. Emma sat back in her chair, stunned. Her mind spun. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about years of deceit, financial manipulation, and a woman who had built a life on taking what wasn't hers. She stared at the documents. Her father's name was on every account, and yet he had no idea. Or maybe, deep down, he did, but chose not to look too closely. That night, Emma met her best friend Lily for coffee. She told her everything. About the lawsuit, about the new financial records, and about the internal war raging inside her. "If I bring this to court, it'll destroy my dad," Emma said, staring at her cup. "It'll wreck whatever peace he has left." Lily leaned forward. "Emma, he deserves to know. You've spent years letting people avoid the truth to keep the peace. Where has that gotten you?" Emma knew she was right. She couldn't protect her father from reality forever. Carol's behavior wasn't just selfish, it was predatory. Emma looked up, eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. "Then I'll tell the truth, all of it." And this time, no one would silence her. The morning of the trial, Emma walked into the courtroom, with her head held high, despite the storm churning inside her. She wore her one nice blazer, pressed the night before, and clutched a folder filled with everything she'd spent weeks compiling: bank records, pay stubs, and the handwritten notes she'd given Carol when she entrusted her savings. Mr. Peterson walked beside her, calm and focused. Carol was already seated across the room, her expression unreadable, dressed immaculately in a tailored suit with her hair perfectly styled. She looked more like she was attending a luncheon than facing accusations of theft. Emma's father sat beside her, fidgeting nervously, unable to meet his daughter's eyes. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Mr. Peterson opened with a quiet but firm summary of the case. Then he began presenting the evidence: 2 years of pay stubs from Emma's job at the diner, the steady deposits into her savings account, the note she'd written asking Carol to invest the money for college. Carol's lawyer tried to twist the narrative, insisting the money had been a gift, given freely by Emma as a gesture of support for her brother Luke's wedding. Emma clenched her fists, but stayed silent. When her turn came, she stood slowly, her voice trembling. "That money was never a gift," Emma said, looking directly at the judge. "I saved it myself. I worked weekends, nights, even holidays. I trusted Carol when she said she'd invest it. She told me it would grow, that it was the smart thing to do. I believed her. She didn't invest it, she spent it on her son's wedding, without asking me. She stole my future." A hush fell over the room. Then Mr. Peterson handed the judge a new stack of documents, Carol's subpoenaed financial records. Emma watched as the judge flipped through the pages, her expression growing more serious by the second. "Pattern," rabbits begin to say. "This show years of unauthorized withdrawals from joint family accounts, luxury items, trips, personal spending that Mr. Williams was not made aware of. This goes beyond misuse of my client's savings." Emma's father looked like the ground had just dropped out from under him. He leaned back, pale and wide-eyed, staring at Carol as if he'd never seen her before. Carol's composure cracked. She stammered, trying to explain the purchases as gifts or shared expenses. But the judge wasn't convinced. "This isn't a misunderstanding," the judge said firmly. "This is theft, and this court does not take financial exploitation lightly." Emma's heart pounded as the judge delivered the verdict. "In light of the evidence, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Williams. The defendant is ordered to repay the full $8,000, 0 cents plus accrued interest, within 60 days. Furthermore, I am recommending a deeper review into the defendant's financial practices. as this court has concerns regarding long-term misappropriation of shared assets. Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands shook, but her back remained straight. She had done it. She had stood up, spoken out, and been believed. Her father's head dropped into his hands. Carol sat frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and barely contained fury. But Emma didn't look at either of them. For the first time in years, she wasn't seeking anyone's approval. She felt grounded, heard, validated. She didn't just win a case, she reclaimed her voice, and no one would ever steal it again. Outside the courthouse, Carol stormed ahead, heels clacking sharply on the pavement. She spun around, her voice low and sharp. "You'll regret this, Emma. Mark my words." Emma didn't flinch. She stood tall, steady, her eyes clear. "No, you'll regret underestimating me." Carol scoffed and turned away, but Emma knew something had shifted. The courtroom verdict was more than a ruling. It was a line drawn in stone. Emma had stood up not only to a woman who had betrayed her, but to years of silence, erasure, and manipulation. Back home, Carol barely spoke. She glided around the house like a ghost, her once booming presence reduced to clenched jaws and slammed cabinet doors. She didn't acknowledge Emma. She didn't speak to Emma's father, unless absolutely necessary. And then, without warning, she began packing. One morning, Emma came downstairs to find 3 half-hailed suitcases in the hallway and her father sitting on the couch, pale and stunned. Carol had left a single note on the dining table: "I'll let you know where to send my things." No goodbye, no remorse, no explanation. Her father sat silently for a long time, then finally whispered, "She lied to me." His voice cracked, the disbelief catching in his throat. Emma sat beside him. "You didn't want to see it," she said gently, "but now you know." He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "I thought I was protecting you by keeping the peace, but I let you down." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest, and that was enough. That night, Emma sat in her room and reopened the tabs on her laptop. Nursing programs, financial aid, housing options. She had paused the dream for too long. Now, she was ready to begin again. The next morning, her father knocked on her door. "If you're still thinking about school," he said, "I want to help. I should have helped from the start." Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no out of pride, but another part, the part that still longed for family support, nodded. "Okay," she said. "Let's start over." Luke, meanwhile, stayed silent. No apology, no message, not even a text. He had posted pictures from his honeymoon, smiling on beaches, holding champagne, completely unbothered. Emma stared at the screen for a moment before shutting it off. She realized she didn't need anything from him, not his validation, not his recognition. His silence didn't wound her anymore. It only proved what she already knew. She had never mattered to him. And that was fine, because she mattered to herself. Emma made a list: applications to submit, campuses to visit, paperwork to finalize. She opened a new savings account, this time with just her name on it. No shared access, no signatures from anyone else, just hers. She also changed her phone lock code. She updated her passwords. She built a financial firewall around her future. No one was going to siphon away her dreams ever again. She scheduled campus tours, reached out to academic advisors, and called her best friend Lily to celebrate. "It's happening," she said. "Really happening." "You did this," Lily said. "You didn't wait for someone to fix it. You became the fix." The court's decision had given Emma back more than money. It gave her clarity, power, momentum. For years, she'd felt invisible in her own home, dismissed, talked over, disregarded. But now? Now she was the author of her own next chapter. Her revenge wasn't fire or fury. It wasn't shouting matches or broken dishes. It was quiet independence. It was rebuilding, smarter, stronger, without apology. Emma looked at her calendar and smiled. College visits, application deadlines, nursing prep courses. Her future wasn't something she had to beg for anymore. It was hers to build. And as she closed her laptop that night, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Emma stood on the steps of her new dorm, a single box in her arms and a nervous smile on her face. Her father stepped out of the car behind her, carrying 2 more boxes, looking around awkwardly. It was a crisp September morning, and campus buzzed with the energy of new beginnings. Laughing students, parents snapping goodbye photos, a faint hum of opportunity in the air. Her dad set the boxes down and looked at her. "I'm proud of you, Emma," he said, the words catching slightly in his throat. Emma paused. It wasn't an apology for the years he hadn't spoken up. It wasn't a fix for the silence that had lingered between them. But it was something. It was a step. She smiled. "Thanks, Dad." They spent the next hour unpacking. As she laid her textbooks on the shelf, intro to anatomy, human physiology, medical ethics, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Ownership. Not just over the books or the room, but over her life. Every binder placed on the desk, every sock folded into a drawer, was a piece of her reclaiming what had been taken. It wasn't just about recovering the money Carol had stolen. It was about proving to herself, to the world, that she belonged here, that no one could take it from her again. Her father left after an emotional goodbye, and Emma stood by her window for a long time, watching the students below. It hit her. She had made it. On her own terms. College quickly became everything she hoped it would be. Her classes challenged her in the best ways. She met other students who shared her passion for healthcare. She joined the pre-nursing society, signed up for a volunteer program at the campus clinic, and formed a study group that turned into a close-knit circle of friends. She began to laugh again. Deep, real laughs. Not the cautious, careful chuckle she used at home to avoid Carol's judgment or Luke's indifference. These were belly laughs in the dining hall, late-night giggles over study flashcards, quiet smiles exchanged with professors who saw her potential and nurtured it. Every time she swiped her student ID, she felt power surge through her. Every book she purchased with her own money, every exam she passed, every sleepless night she endured studying. It all meant something. It meant she had survived. It meant she had won. Back home, Carol had gone silent. She hadn't reached out. Luke stayed distant. No apology, no message, no acknowledgement. And that, to Emma, was perfect. Because she didn't need them anymore. She didn't need the performance of a family that only showed up when it was convenient. What she had now was real. Her best friend Lily visited on weekends. Her professors invited her to apply for scholarships. A mentor from the campus clinic asked if she'd consider research assistant work next semester. She was no longer the quiet, invisible girl in the corner. She wasn't the girl who let things happen to her. She was the girl who stood up, who fought back, who spoke when it was easier to stay silent. She demanded what she deserved, and got it. Justice hadn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came in the small victories. An A on a paper, a new friend in a lecture hall, her name printed on a university ID. The best part? It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. Emma realized that the best justice wasn't in courtroom declarations or angry confrontations. The best justice was living well. And she was just getting started. Emma sat on a weathered campus bench, the late afternoon sun warming her shoulders as students passed by with backpacks slung low and earbuds in. In her hands was a paper cup of coffee, steam curling gently toward the sky. Across from her sat Lily, her best friend, and constant reminder that some people do show up when it counts. "You're thriving," Lily said, nudging her playfully. Emma smiled. It wasn't just the compliment, it was the truth behind it. For years, she had felt invisible, moving quietly around a household that prioritized someone else's dreams over her own. She had buried her frustration, swallowed her voice, and convinced herself that peace was better than confrontation. But peace never came. Now, her life looked completely different. She was 2 months into her nursing program. Her schedule was packed with labs, study sessions, and early morning classes, but she loved every bit of it. For the first time, her hard work was leading to something that mattered, something she could build on. Her professors respected her. Her classmates looked to her for leadership. She belonged. Her dad called every Sunday evening now. Sometimes they talked about school, sometimes they talked about nothing. He was still awkward, still hesitant, but he was trying. Emma appreciated the effort. She wasn't expecting miracles, just effort. And that, finally, he was giving. She hadn't heard from Carol since the court ruling. No emails, no apologies, no passive-aggressive comments left on sticky notes, just silence. It was the kind of silence Emma had feared when she first stood up for herself. But now, it was the silence she welcomed. Peaceful. Freeing. She didn't miss Carol. She didn't need closure from someone who never saw her as an equal. She had given Carol too much power for too long. And now, with every step she took on this campus, with every lecture attended, and every late-night flashcard review, she was building a new life. One where she was in charge. As the sun began to dip behind the buildings, casting long golden streaks across the quad, Emma looked up at the sky and let the warmth settle into her skin. Her thoughts drifted back to the kitchen table, the moment Carol admitted to stealing her savings. She remembered the way her hands trembled, the way her father stood in stunned silence. The burning rage in her chest, but it didn't sting anymore. Not like it used to. She had carried that pain like armor, afraid to let it go in case she needed it to survive. But now she realized she didn't. She had something better. She had her voice, her dignity, her future. Emma stood up and tossed her empty cup into the trash, Lily falling into step beside her. The campus lights flickered on, laughter echoed in the distance. Her life didn't revolve around anyone else's expectations anymore. It belonged to her. And that made all the difference. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your future? Emma's story isn't just about stolen money. It's about stolen belief, stolen dignity, stolen space at a table she was told she belonged to until she wasn't useful anymore. Carol thought she could reroute Emma's dreams and walk away with a smile, convinced her position in the family would shield her from accountability. She thought Emma would stay silent, like always. But what Carol didn't count on was Emma finding the courage to speak, to fight, and to win. Emma didn't just recover her savings, she reclaimed her future. She held up the truth in a courtroom and let the consequences fall where they belonged. She didn't burn bridges for revenge. She built a new road for herself and walked it with her head high. If you've ever been forced to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity, if you've ever had to stand alone to protect what was yours, we want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. And if Emma's strength resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and join us here at Veiled Fury, where betrayal becomes power and injustice finds its answer. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it's a filing cabinet, a sworn testimony, and a girl who finally says, enough.